Let's
Well,
do this.
hello there. Let's do this. How's it going, Tuli?
It is going very well. Thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I am good. Thank you.
Excellent.
Tuli, do you notice anything different in our Zoom room today?
I noticed that you have a fake looking orchid in your background.
Okay. Okay.
And that I don't know if this is real or fake, this plant behind me. But what I know is very, very real is our guest, the
Who's our
one,
guest?
Very
the
real.
only Francis Poe. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the podcast.
Thank y'all for having me.
Welcome, Francis. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm pretty excited to be here as well.
Awesome.
Welcome to
Awesome.
the now called Tuli and Alma podcast.
Yeah, the now
And
called.
so why don't we start off with, do you have any ideas for what we should call this podcast?
Yeah, that's a good
Ooh.
question.
Let me ponder on that through the podcast, and
Okay,
Okay.
I'll let you know at the end.
great idea.
That sounds great.
Okay.
That sounds
All right, so
awesome.
Alma, what are we talking to Francis about today?
Well, first, we definitely want to hear a little bit about Francis. So we definitely want to open up some space so that you can tell us a bit about yourself, how you're in this LOC world. In fact, we'd also like to just going back to that pilot episode, getting a feel for how you define that LOC. But one of the big topics is something that you know a little bit about because you research, which is curiosity at work. That's kind of the main topic we'll be getting to, and what that looks like, what it could look like, how it could apply, right, to our work life. So let's start, Francis Poe. Where are you located right now? Where are you from? How did you get here?
I am coming to you from Greenville, South Carolina. This is where I was born and raised.
Nice.
That's amazing. And I think I think it would be helpful for us to, maybe, I feel this is an annoying question, but who is Francis Poe? I think that's the first thing we would want to know.
I think there's a good podcast name, Annoying Questions with Tuli and Alma.
You're going to get a lot of takers with that one.
For sure. People love that.
But good
All
question.
right.
Let's hear it.
Well, I am a change management practitioner. I come from the nonprofit space, mostly dabbled in commercial real estate development for a little while.
Wow.
But I have a passion for helping organizations figure out how to utilize their people better. And in the change practitioner realm, my sweet spot, the part that I just love to do, is figuring out why there is a problem, why people think a solution would work, and generally how people got in the situation they are at any given moment. I found that most people, when they are solving for problems, really don't understand the why. They try to jump straight into solutioning without figuring out what's the root cause of issues.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really cool, and I hope we'll get to that. But as far as like Francis, there was one little thing in your story that I was like, I dabbled in commercial real estate, and then and now I'm a change practitioner, and this is my sweet spot. So could you go back, like, how did you get commercial real estate and now being interested in this? Like, what were the bridges? What were the connections that brought you to this world?
Okay, well, I may have to back up a little bit more than that. So
Please
you
do.
can stop me when I'm talking too
Okay.
much.
You can start from like the hospital in which you were born.
Okay.
If you were born in a
I can do
hospital,
that.
maybe
I was
you
born in
weren't,
a hospital.
because that would be
Nice.
an interesting story too, right?
Yeah. So I am a graduate from Appalachian State University and was an art education major and taught middle school art for a year in a very low income school. It was 96% below the poverty line. Now that school is 100% below the poverty line. And it introduced me to broken systems. Um,
Wow.
and I thought that I would continue to teach art. I did a year hiatus. I moved to New Zealand. I wanted to experience a different culture and just try things on my own. And I wanted to get out of the South. When I came back, I thought I would teach high school art, but ended up working for an Episcopal church
Wow.
and took a ministry area that had about 15 people in it and grew it to over 300 active participants.
Wow. These
And
are, Francis, those are the participants you're talking about. Like it's a volunteer thing, right?
Yeah, so 20
Okay.
and 30-year-olds, people who were showing up regularly, getting involved in things. And once I, quote, fixed that, made it
Mhm.
sustainable where somebody else could come in and manage it, I really wanted to move on to another topic and ended up in doing community outreach and did an overhaul of that area as well. And through
Wow.
all of that, I realized I really loved helping figure out how do we move past a problem and how do we get people engaged in solving it. So once those fun things were figured out, like we started the only residential home in South Carolina for survivors of sex trafficking.
Wow.
We started a book distribution that has given over 500,000 books to elementary aged kids in Greenville County, and even developed a pocket neighborhood in a low income area. And so you may notice I like to take things on, try to improve them, and then I'm not a maintainer. I got to get out of the way. And so there wasn't really a next project for me to do. So I found myself in the commercial real estate world. I thought this is a whole nother venue. Did not know as much about it as I did my previous roles. And so I was just eager to learn. And then COVID happened, and a lot of what I was hoping to do did not get to come into fruition. And COVID helped me really think, what is it that, as Diane Kanapke will say, what is the Francis size hole in the world that you need to insert yourself in? She says it much more eloquently than I do. And realize that I want to help people go through change. And I didn't talking to somebody about it, and they were like, well, why don't you go into change management? I don't even know what that is. And which makes me think a lot of y'all's first podcast episode on what is LOC. Came across the Northwestern program, felt like it had been written for me, people being at the center of change. And so that's what I did. I quit my job so that I could spend all my time and energy learning, fully immersing myself in the topic, and then graduated in June. And now I'm a change management practitioner.
Wow.
Does that answer your question, Alma?
Yes. And it's fascinating because Francis, well, my personal confession, I've known you for 2 years. You and I were we started at the same time, and we were in our first team together. And there were parts of your story that I just learned about today. Like the fact that you grew a volunteer part of the Episcopalian Church from 15 to over 300. Like, that's impressive. And also another thing that's really resonating, I think I did know this about you, and I'm sure Tuli did too, is that you are definitely someone who is attracted to learning. And you're also attracted to challenges, like something you don't really know much about, and seeing how you can figure it out. And I also like that what you mentioned. What did you call it? You called yourself a maintainer. Not a maintainer. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Were
I'm
those your
not a
words?
maintainer.
So you like to start it here. Here's
Mhm.
not a fire, but like here's a here's a thing that is structured. It's running. Peace out. right?
Yeah. Let me get
Okay.
out of the way. And I'm going to let you write my resume after this.
Yeah, I would like to hire you for something. I wish I could hire you for something. That was actually really well told as well. I think we learned some cool things about you. I don't know. What do you think, Tuli? Did you learn something about Francis?
Absolutely. No, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. I obviously have lots of questions, but I'll hold back. Um, and and what I do want to ask you is, so you came across the MSLOC, the Masters of Science in Learning and Organizational Change at Northwestern. First of all, how did you come across that program? Like, what was it, Google? And if so, what were the terms that you were Googling? Was it organizational change?
I think that I Googled organizational change and change management, and some top 20 list of grad schools came up, and Northwestern was on it. And I was going through the different websites and read some of them, and they were like, that's not a good fit. And when I saw Northwestern's, I was like, oh, wow, I'm definitely interested in that. And then it was like, oh, wow, that's Northwestern. So applied to Northwestern and 4 other schools. Northwestern was my stretch school. And when I got accepted, I was like, all right, I got to go.
That's awesome. Do you remember what were the things that stood out to you about the program, or that attracted you to the program?
Yeah, the main thing that it was people-centered change, and that it was individuals, teams, organizations, systems. You could get micro, macro level change, but it all starts with people and how leaders need to come around and support individuals in order for there to be good change in the world. And that is similar to my own experience. When you don't have those when you don't have good leaders and good management in place that can nurture that change and support it, change efforts can fail.
So so now that you're finished, and now that you've graduated, what are some of the lessons, either about change, about learning, or otherwise, that you feel that you've gained from your time in the MSLOC program?
Oh gosh, how long is this podcast? I think I could go from here on, but I'll do my main takeaway. And that is that change should be incremental. You may be able to see the destination you want to go and realize that there are 1,000 steps between here and there. But you can't do all of those at one time. You've got to start with each small step. You've got to test it. You've got to see if it works. Because if you try to throw all the changes at people at once and things aren't working, you can't pinpoint which change isn't working because you've thrown too much at it. And also, people just get change fatigue. And so if you think of it like just with your own personal goals, if I'm trying to start exercising or eat better, if I can start with one little thing rather than 12 big things, then I'm probably more likely to stick with it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good takeaway, I think.
And ask lots of questions.
Woo!
Never ending questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that I think that well, I met you in my first class at MSLSC, which was well, the number is 420. I don't remember the title of the class. I've said this a number of times in this podcast. The numbers are easier for me to remember, especially a number like 420. What's up? Shout out Los Angeles. But I met you in that class. It was a great class taught by Eric and Ryan, and there was someone else on the teaching staff. But Eric Friedman, who was who taught that class, who is just fantastic. He used to host these office hours
Yes,
before
phenomenal, Eric.
class. And Francis was a regular, and I tried to be a regular. And yeah, that is when I got exposed to you and to your endless curiosity and questions, and just, learning, your love for learning, which has been so cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
thank you. Love those office hours. Everyone should take advantage of them.
It was one of those things for me, I have to say, that like, because it was my first class, I just assumed that every class would have that. It's like, oh, I guess this is what, and then, I mean, every class or many other classes are wonderful in their own right. But I think it's an act of tremendous generosity on the part of Eric. I think it speaks a lot more to who he is, to be honest, than
In
anything else.
his endless curiosity.
Yes.
And
Right.
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So now I have a big question now that you've also been through this. So what is your definition, Francis Poe, of LOC?
All
What is
right.
LOC?
LOC, learning and
prepared for
organizational
this.
change. Yeah.
Leading organizational change. Okay, so I'm going to go
leading?
back.
Is it leading?
No, learning.
Learning
Oh.
and organizational change. How long
maybe
have
it
I
should
been on the
be.
program?
Maybe, okay, we just learned something. The program is not learning and organizational change. It is actually leading organizational change, and people have been getting this wrong.
Right, and it's Maslow is the pronunciation of the whole thing.
Yes, no, it is learning and organizational change. And
Okay.
I'm going to mention Diane again, because Diane is the one who helped me figure out what it was that we were studying. So she said, you can't learn if you don't change, and you can't change if you don't learn. So I'm going to expand on that. So learning and organizational change focuses on building our understanding of how individuals, teams, organizations, and systems learn so that we are equipped to help them change. So this Northwestern program then arms us with a variety of tools to assess where the people, teams, organizations, and systems are in their change journeys, why they are in a need of change, what needs to change, and then help them determine where they need to go next and how they are going to get there. That is my definition of learning and organizational change.
Have you used it like at, I don't know, happy hours or getting to know people? Like, have you tested this definition out with people who aren't from this program?
I've learned that like my sweet father just cannot grasp what it is that I studied or what it is that I've learned. And this definition kind of stuck with him. And I'm like, okay, then this makes sense. But it does, it's much more, I do it much more conversationally than, spouting off a definition.
Yes. Imagine.
That's good. Really cool. Yeah, I think, look, I think for me, even still till this day, I totally can relate to your sweet father, because I think that talking about learning in the context of work and just in the context of organizations is still a foreign concept to people, because that's just not, we think about like learning as school, right? Like you go to school to learn. We don't necessarily automatically think about that at work. I saw that Amy Edmondson, the great Amy Edmondson, shared on her social media. She was on some panel where she was asked to, where each one, apparently it's like 100 years of the Harvard Business Review, and so Amy Edmondson and some other smart people were on a panel sharing kind of their favorite or like the most impactful HBR article on them. And she shared one called "Teaching Smart People How to Learn" by Chris Argy. How do you pronounce his name? It's Argyris.
Is it Argus?
Argus. There's an R in there somewhere. He's really well known scholar.
Ryan will know.
Yeah. I just don't know how to pronounce his name. And apparently this 1991 HBR article had a huge impact on art. This is where he, I think he's the one that started this concept of like double loop learning and all that. The stuff that Alma, that you and I talked about from like Senge,
Yeah,
they're
learning teams.
yeah. So there's like a lot of overlap there. But like apparently this idea of like learning in organizations and like this idea of like we're talking about change in an organization, which is like a moment that is like a challenge. I mean, in truth, we could keep talking about this and realize that it's never ending in the context of organizations, right? But yeah, like this idea that like to be successful in an organization requires learning, and in some ways requires intentional learning. Is not easy for people to grasp. It's still not even necessarily the most natural thing for me to grasp. I'm still, I'm still learning it.
Well, and I wonder if it's the word learning that gets in the way, because I mean, we're going to talk about curiosity, but
Right.
curiosity is just a simpler form of learning. When you're curious, you are taking on something that you did not know before. And I do think that we've limited learning to what we can glean in schools or in classrooms rather than what are we doing in the world. And I do think that MSLOC is trying to help us to realize that we are constantly learning from our interactions with others, from our cultures our own cultures and how we bump up against other cultures. It's just this never ending opportunity if we'll allow it to and open our eyes to it.
Yeah. Well, Francis and Alma, I'm curious from both of you. Can you think of an example of a time, or can you think of a time at work where it was learning that that basically helped you through a project, or like without learning you couldn't have done X or Y? Just to make this a little bit more concrete for people.
Francis is nodding, so you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing commercial real estate development, I had to learn spreadsheets and formulas, and that was not my forte. And I remember having to pore over and study these things so that I could do my job. And then it just became second nature of how to read these reports and put data, and that's just I think that was just a learning that I had to achieve in order to even keep my job.
Yeah. And I feel like that's like the most basic level of learning, right? Like learning the skills that are required to do your job.
Yeah. In my case, in consulting, actually, every single consulting engagement, even where you are an external consultant, right, brought in to help solve any type of challenge or problem, the first step, now that I think about it, really is learning, because you come in as someone who doesn't know the industry or their needs or their team or whatever it is. And I learned from a consultant once, the way she framed it, I thought was really, really cool. She says, the first thing I do is kind of sit down with the client and say, okay, explain your business to me for dummies. I want a crash course on your business or your industry, like the whole context. And then we would just kind of sit there and like take notes and ask questions. and in some ways that particular framing alludes to traditional in school learning. But more than that, it was the attitude of like, hey, we cannot even pretend to come alongside you in any type of challenge if we're not first in the position of learners. And I found that really, really powerful, because usually consultants come in as quote unquote experts, right? But I think even being a good consultant, the first step is really, I got to learn about your world, right?
Alma, I love that. I think that really a consultant's job is to be an expert in asking questions. We have this wonderful class, building client relationships, and if you come in from a place of humility and curiosity and learning, you're going to get so much further than coming in as a know-it-all, because we don't know
Yeah.
somebody's business. We don't know their company. It's
Right.
very rigid and a little arrogant to come in as a know-it-all.
Yeah, I think both of you are making a really important point here, which is that learning is not just an action. It's like it's a state of being,
Mm,
right? Like
Mhm.
right. So to go, it's different to go into your work and to go, yeah, to do your to go even to go through life as a learner and to go through it as a non-learner, an unlearner.
an unlearner. There are learning teams, Francis, and there are unlearning teams. You'll learn that in episode 3.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I had
And
to
there are
pause and
learners and
write down this
unlearners.
quote by Tuli. Learning is, and I think I paraphrased it just a tad, so
I'm
you
sure
can
you made
correct
it
me,
better.
but learning is not just an action, it is a state of being.
Yeah.
Oh, well done,
Yeah.
Tuli.
All right. No, this I was just synthesizing what I heard from you, to be quite honest.
So really, it was us, Francis. It was
Yeah.
us.
And you hear that humility coming out as
There we
well. Yeah.
go.
Can I just I can't help myself. I want to just share something really quick before we move on to curiosity, which I do want to move on to. But
We'll do it.
okay, so I recently read this book by Bill Browder, who he's been in the news a lot lately because he was a hedge fund manager in Russia and had a falling out with Putin. And he wrote a book called Red Notice, which is incredible. Highly recommend it. Reads like a spy thriller, except it's all true.
Real.
Yeah, yeah. And but in it, this blew my mind. So after business school, he went to work for the Boston Consulting Group in London, and he went to work in London because he wanted to work in Eastern Europe, but they didn't really have anything yet in Eastern Europe. Communism was still a thing, and they said, okay, go to London, and as soon as things like open up, you're on the first job. So his first job, when finally, a BCG project in Eastern Europe, was for a bus company in Poland. This bus company apparently was losing a lot of money, and they're like, okay, go to some small town in Poland and help this bus company figure out what they could do to like save their business. And he's like, okay, how? Like, all right, okay, like, how do I do this? I know I just went to business school and whatever. I work for a fancy consulting firm. And they're like, no, here's what you do. Go to the archives, look through all of the people that work for BCG all over the world, look at all the projects they've done, that they've done, and find the people that have worked on a transportation project. Go interview those people and then put together a presentation for this company. And whatever, because they have to put in a bid or whatever it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And right, so essentially what they're saying is BCG, one of the most prestigious consulting companies in the world, right? Your job as a consultant is literally to just interview other consultants who have had experience doing the thing that you're about to do. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Blew my mind. But in essence, the truth is, again, we can be cynical about it, and there's plenty of room for cynicism when it comes to large, fancy consulting groups. But also, it also makes sense, right? If they've done great work, and then that's what you do. You interview people that have done it, and
you're learning from others.
Yeah.
Right.
At least as a first step, yes, that is legitimate. Perhaps the story goes on and
hopefully, I'm sure. The story does go on. He spent 6 months living there, and being embedded in the company every single day. And yes, of course, once they got the job, like he had to do the work. There's no doubt. But this was in terms of just learning about the transportation industry and how it all works. And like this is what you do. You go and interview other people that have done it.
That's so cool. And I doubt, I think that story hits hard because it's a consulting firm, right?
Yeah.
And so we have certain expectations of big consulting firms. But really, if that would have been in a different industry and Frances gets put on in a new business unit, but she doesn't know anything about it. For her to go and interview and people who already have experience in that wouldn't seem as weird. And it really is. I mean, I think this just also goes to show what a transversal skill it is that we, like some just a very necessary skill to learn how to ask, like you were saying, Francis, to learn how to ask really good questions, and then that attitude or disposition or state of being of like, I first need to learn as much as possible before I even try to come up with a solution or think through anything, right?
So, Alma, I think you just named what LOC is.
Oh, did I? What did
Yeah,
I
you
do? What did I
first have
say?
to learn about things before you can come up with a solution.
Dun dun dun. Drum
You're
roll.
welcome.
We will edit that. Thank you. Okay, good. I'm glad you expected that. It's true. We first need to learn things. Well, what's really similar to actually what you said was a quote from Diane, which was, in order to let's see if I learned it. In order to change, you need to learn. In order to learn, you need to change. Was it that
Yep.
or the
Uh-huh.
opposite? Okay. And, anyways, Francis, Julie, you mind if I jump in and get to
I only
curiosity?
mind if you ask me if I mind.
Uh, should I ask again? See if he minds, just to annoy him.
Uh,
Okay. Speaking of annoying questions, all right. So, dear Francis, so we've talked about LOC, everything, and now this topic of curiosity. Before you even tell us like what curiosity in the workplace is and about what you studied, what made you curious about curiosity? Like, how did you even get to a point of this would be cool to study?
and we should
What's
say
that? Yeah.
that this is what Frances studied for her
Yes.
capstone project.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the dreaded survey that goes out to MSLOC students saying, what is going to be your topic? What do you want to study? I really struggled with that because there has yet to be a class that I did not really enjoy or want to learn more about. I actually really struggled to figure out which classes I was going to take. I wanted to take all of the classes that were offered. And strategy seems to have been like a key topic in my working career. And so I reached out to the wonderful BK Simerson, who is also a graduate of Appalachian State University,
Uh-huh.
and just wanted to talk to him about capstone and picking a topic and could it possibly be strategy. And he gave me this phenomenal advice. He said, don't study something that you think is going to help you in your career. Like, don't let that be the driving factor in picking your topic. It shouldn't be because you're going to work in that field later on. He said, you need to pick a topic that if you see an article about it in 30 years, you're still going to want to learn about it. And so he just kept saying, what are you curious about? And I realized that the actual act, the thought of being curious is what I'm curious about. I was really curious, like, are some people curious and just other people not? Are there different levels of curiosity? Can you increase curiosity?
Mm.
And so that was that's what drove me to pick curiosity in the workplace as a topic. And
Wow.
then
And
go ahead.
no, one, that's fascinating, like the whole process of how you got there. And you're kind of meta about it. But also, too, did you have any doubts about whether you were going to find, like, did you know if there was material out there, academic literature on this topic of curiosity? Had you
Oh,
come across anything before, or?
totally had doubts. I had no idea what I was doing. No, I had not come across really. I mean, I had come across articles that in order to be better at your job, you need to be curious, or in order
Okay.
to build relationships, you need to be curious in other people. But I had not really come across anything. Now, Ryan, one of our professors, he in his both of his books, he mentions curiosity. And so I did have a little bit, I was like, okay, I know that Ryan has written about curiosity. So I have a starting point.
Smart.
Can I just interject there? Did you read both of Ryan's books?
No, Ryan, I apologize. I have not read your books. I have read large
I'm glad.
portions of your books. But when in the article, in the chapters of Ryan's books that we had to read for class, the ones around curiosity were the ones that sparked my curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I also I read the parts that were assigned for our classes, and they were great. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's a great writer.
Yeah. Alma, do you think that it wasn't right of me to put Francis on the spot there?
No, I thought it was
Bring it.
funny that she spoke directly to Ryan because I happened to run into him this
Oh,
afternoon as I
funny.
was
That's right.
telling
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
And he was like, "How's the podcast going?" And I was like, "I don't know. You tell me if you listened."
Yeah,
And he's
and
like,
for
"Yeah, I've been listening." And I was like, "Okay, so now we know he's listening, Francis." So I think he'll probably write you and say that he
that's
accepts
awesome.
your
And
apology.
and for listeners, we're talking about Ryan Smerick, and his books are, I think they're both available on Amazon. Buy them; they're great. Recommended.
Ryan Smack.
Yeah, actually, Ryan is responsible for leading me to the article that became game changer for my studying curiosity. It's where everything came together and made sense. So,
So wait, you talk to BK. You're like, curiosity is the thing. It's
mhm.
fantastic. What and then like what happened next? That's when you go to Ryan's articles. And at what point did you come
Mm,
across the game changer article?
yeah, so I probably spent, gosh, at least 10 hours reading articles on curiosity and
Wow.
realized that it was not a black and white term like most things in our lives.
Mm.
You are not either, it's not like you either have it or you don't have it. There's lots of different types of curiosity. Um, and there's lots of different definitions for curiosity and terms. And it was, as our another one of our professors, Melinda, calls it citation burritos, where you have when you're reading an article and um, lots of other articles are cited in the
Uh-huh.
article, then that's a great place to chase down new information. And so I chased a lot of these citation burritos and led me to a few different articles. And it was in an office hours talking with Ryan. And I was just trying to wrap my head around these different types of curiosity and mentioned a author, a researcher, and wanted Ryan to look up this one article I was referring to, but he thought I was talking about a different article and brought up that article. And the one he referenced was the one that I really needed. And then all of a sudden, my question became clear. What I wanted to study became clear. And then I was able to move on.
But wait, why? What was this article about? Like what did you learn in this article?
Ooh, so
And
now
what's
we're
it
really
called?
going to
And
get
who
into
wrote it?
curious.
And what's it called and who wrote it and send us the link
Oh.
now?
So it's Todd Kashton, and he and a team of researchers figured out the 5 different curiosity types and how to measure them. And
Wow.
that led to me trying to figure out, okay, is there a correlation between how engaged someone is in their work and an individual's curiosity type?
So to clarify there, the curiosity types are they're like different shades of curiosity, or are these more like personality types? What do you mean by types there?
They are not personality types.
Okay,
So
that's
before
good.
I get into the different curiosity types, let me just say that you are more than likely not just one type. You could be different shades of any of these types, but some of the types may rise to the surface.
Okay. And are
So
these fixed or not fixed?
no, curiosity is
Oh,
not fixed. Although there still needs to be a lot of research around how does one increase their curiosity. But there is a great book by Ian Leslie called Curious, and he talks a lot about how curiosity is contagious. So if you are around curious people, you are more likely to become curious as well. Just like by you being curious, you are more likely to bring other people along in their curiosity.
wow, Francis. This is like, okay, I'm getting excited. Keep going.
Okay, so the five types of curiosity. The first one is called joyous exploration, and this
Ooh,
is the curiosity type around individuals that just love to learn or open to new experiences, and they are invested in their own personal growth. Then you've got deprivation sensitivity, and this is negative experiences are produced by not knowing. I like to think of this as our all of the researchers who were trying to find vaccinations for a vaccine for COVID, who didn't sleep, didn't eat. They were determined to find that vaccine.
okay.
I also experienced deprivation sensitivity trying to finish my capstone because I sat at my computer like in the data trying to figure it out and realized I needed sleep more than anything. So that's deprivation sensitivity.
So,
There's Go ahead.
Francis, a question there, a clarification there. Um, Deprivation sensitivity, is it almost like a motive, like what motivates you to be curious? What drives your curiosity? Is that another way to look at it, or am I misunderstanding?
I think it could be a driver and as well as how it manifests
Okay.
itself. Um, and it shows up for people in very different ways. I mean, it can be another way this shows up for me is that when I sit down and work on a puzzle, I have a really hard time not finishing the puzzle. Um, but for other people, it could be, um, you know, not going to sleep until you finish the recipe. You figure out how to, cook the perfect cookies, or it's
Yeah.
it's any time that your needs, like your basic health, like how you would live as a healthy individual day in and day out, things your quest to uncover something is more important than those basic everyday things. So you are willing to sacrifice the sleep, the food, conversations with others
Mm,
in an effort to solve this unknown.
okay, that's helpful.
The third curiosity type is called stress tolerance. And these are people who are just adept at handling the unknown, complex problems. They are happy with ambiguity. You can pick them up and put them in a new social situation and they thrive completely fine. Alma,
Is
you
that you,
definitely
Francis? I was thinking of you.
see that's definitely Alma there. Never met a stranger.
Is it also
Um,
you? Is it also you?
yeah, I'm pretty
Okay,
relaxed in a new setting. Yeah.
cool, cool.
So already you can see I've named three different curiosity types, and I think that I have bits of each of these in me.
Right.
The next one, which um, has been a really fun one for me to study, is thrill seeking, and those are people that lean into high stress situations for the thrill of the adventure.
Mm.
So these are your people who, let's go bungee jumping or skydiving. It could also be, let's go to Vegas and I'm going to put $5,000 down and I'm okay. Like the rush of, am I going to lose it all or am I going to win it, is almost more exciting than if you win it. These are bet the company type people. I would imagine Elon Musk has a pretty large thrill seeking curiosity.
Oh, Elon. Okay.
And so then the last grouping is social curiosity. And these are, you either have overt curiosity, social curiosity, or covert curiosity. Now, overt curiosity is what the two of you are doing right now with me on this podcast. You are interested in what I have to say, you're interested in what I know, you're curious about it, and you're asking me direct questions. Covert curiosity is where you obtain information through gossip or sneaky means.
Chisme.
So this could
Cheese
be,
me.
what did you say?
Cheese me. It was actually Tuli who said it first. Tuli, what's cheese me?
Gossip.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
Yeah.
believe,
important
right?
Spanish word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Love learning
Cheese
a
me,
new
cheese me.
word. Um, and so these could be anything from, let's say you were at a restaurant and the couple next to you is fighting and you're like, hey, we're going to be quiet so I can listen to what they're fighting about. Or it could be simply, I don't want to ask Frances about her research on curiosity. I'm just going to go online and find the study and read it myself. Or, I like to think of investigative reporters have some covert social curiosity.
I have never done the thing at the restaurant you mentioned. Ever have I ever.
Right. So as I name these different curiosity types, are there any that gravitate to either of you that you're like, ooh, I'm definitely one of these?
Well, you called me out already, and I tend to agree. So I saw like what you said is uh, about little strands of each one being present. Yeah, I definitely can see that. But one of them is much stronger. But Tuli, what about you?
I think the joyous exploration one really kind of stood out to me. But also the last one that you talked about, which is like the social curiosity. Um, that also stood out to me only because I'm so curious about other people and I love learning from other people. Um, and I think that for me that manifests itself in both overt and covert ways. Like I overtly ask questions and love to meet new people, but I also covertly I'll get curious about something and I'll want to read everything they've done, or or find out how they were raised or what school they went to, or just information about them. Like that's interesting to me for sure.
Yeah,
I
oh,
think
I
it
see
would be
that.
difficult for the both of you to have a podcast and not be overt social curious.
Tis true.
Yeah.
Tis true.
Like I am overtly asking you questions, but also like I have read your stuff. Was it immediately obvious to you how each of these curiosity dimensions might manifest themselves in a work setting?
Yeah. So the first time I read the article, and as you all know, you have to read articles more than once if you really want to glean the information from them, or at least I do. I
Feel that.
thought, okay, my topic for my capstone research project is going to be on, are certain types of people with with curiosity types, like if you are high in joyous exploration, are you better suited for some jobs rather than other jobs?
Mhm.
Like I was thinking, okay, with the covert social um curiosity, if you're working for a gossip magazine, that's like right up your alley. But if you are covert social curiosity and you are in a work setting where gossip could really become a toxic thing, then that's going to get in the way of you doing your job. So I was making all kinds of assumptions. Okay, there's got to be this like niche that people fall into. And but the more I read, the more I realized, no, that's not, I don't think we can make those determinations. Now that might be a PhD level research project.
Right.
But so then I pared it down and it was, okay, we have this huge work engagement crisis going on in the United States. Over 50% of employees in the United States are actively unengaged in their jobs. And that's a problem. If you're not engaged in your work, then the company suffers, you suffers. There's all this research behind it.
Quick
And so,
definition of work engagement.
sure, I'm going to tell you
Good one,
the
Tuli. Yeah.
exact. So, work engagement refers to an individual's personal connection to their work, as well as a positive, fulfilling work-related state of mind. And work engagement is characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption. So at work, you feel bursting with energy, you're enthusiastic about your job, and you're immersed in your work. And we may not be all three of those things at any given time, but you want to average out that these are both all positive things in your work life.
Okay.
So
That's clear.
I was curious if curiosity played a role in how engaged people were in their work. Like if you had a certain type of curiosity, did that mean that you were more likely to be engaged in your work or less likely? Was there any type of correlation there? And what I found, I was very lucky. I had 193 people fill out my survey. So I had a lot of data to work with. And what I found was that there are actually two different curiosity types that aligned with high work engagement. The first one was joyous exploration, those people who just love to learn. And then the second one was high stress tolerance. Now, joyous exploration was way higher than the stress tolerance, but there was a significant correlation between high stress tolerance and curiosity. So it's one takeaway of that is that if you are just generally curious about the world around you, you are more likely to be engaged in your work. And we're going to make some assumptions here. And that's knowing that you are more curious in general means you're probably going to be more curious in the workplace. I went a step further in all of this and wanted to know if there were how your work was designed, if that played any role in how curious you were. So one of the main drivers of my whole research was, have you been in a job where you just came into work and couldn't wait to be there? You were excited to be there. You were curious about what you were doing. You were eager to learn. And then other jobs, you're like, oh my gosh, this day could not go any slower. Please, can I just punch the clock and get out of here? I am bored out of my mind, even if you have a ton of work to do. So like, what is it that makes us engaged in our work? And curiosity was one thing that I wanted to study. And the other one was how your work is organized. And that's everything from, do you have autonomy? How complex is your role? Is the chair that you're in comfortable? there's all of these different characteristics. There's actually 21 different work design characteristics. So I wanted to know which one of those impacted curiosity as well.
Like like which ones of those 21 things impacted your level of curiosity?
Oh, impacted your level of work engagement. Sorry.
Oh, impact. Okay. And then
Yeah.
with curiosity. Okay, got it.
And
And
so,
what'd you find?
Yeah,
yeah,
what'd
it
you
was
find?
pretty cool. There's the two driving factors in being engaged in your work from the work characteristic level is the first one is task significance. And that's simply that your job matters to someone, to you, to others. Like there has to be some purpose behind what you're doing. If you are doing a job and you know it does not matter, it is not making any impact in the world, on your day to day, in your company, like if you were fired tomorrow, it wouldn't make a bit of difference. That just sucks the life out of your ability to be engaged in work. The second thing was that you get feedback from your job. And that is not where, Alma, I'm working for you and you're going to tell me how I'm doing. This
Okay.
is just by me doing my job, I know if I'm doing a good job or not. And if
So
I don't have the knowledge to understand if I'm doing a good job, then I have low feedback from job. And I'm in this constant state of wonder, like, am I doing okay? I don't know. So the two of those things had a significant influence on someone's work engagement. So it really boiled down to joyous exploration, task significance, and feedback from job, and stress tolerance are those driving factors for how curious or for how engaged you are in your work. And that's a lot of information. So please
No.
ask
Yes.
questions.
Okay, go ahead, Alma.
Well, I'm wondering if you could put those four together. So the two types of like in an example, in a story, I don't know, something from your life or something that you've heard, what that might look like, whether it's doing well at the four or not doing well at those four, however you want to frame it. But
You need me to
it's
paint a
really
picture.
interesting, but like, yeah, please paint a picture. There we go.
Okay, so a previous job that I came in so curious to learn, like could not wait to learn about the business, the different players, how we impacted the world around us, all of these things. I had really high joyous exploration coming into this job. As the job went on, I realized that the task that I was doing every day did not have any significance to the day-to-day operations of the company.
So they were like menial tasks or?
Yeah, it was just, it was, there were things that I had to do each day that kept me busy,
Okay.
but they didn't actually provide any meaning, or they just weren't significant to you. They were not going to change the outcome of our organization. I kind of
Okay.
think that they were tasks that were like, let's just keep Frances busy until we can figure out what else we want to do with her. And in that, I never knew if I was doing a good job or not, because these tasks didn't have any significance. And so what I found was that my curiosity just plummeted. I was not engaged at work at all. And so all these things were so interconnected that if you want somebody to remain curious, then you've got to have the work characteristics to set them up, to kind of be the foundation that allows it. So curiosity is personal. that is something that I individually can bring to my job. Your task significance, like what your job, if your job has meaning, and if your job gives you feedback, those things can only be provided by the organization. So if the organization does not provide those, then they should expect that people are going to have low work engagement. So they all feed
Wow.
into each other.
Do you think it's true the other way too, that when we're engaged, we're also more curious?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this a chicken or the egg thing?
Doesn't matter. Let's eat them
Yeah.
both.
Which is why I think it's so key that we understand that the individual plays a role in this as well as the organization. It really does take two to tango.
Yeah.
And I also think an important thing for organizations to realize, as well as team members and just individuals, is that we may show up very differently in how we are curious. That doesn't mean we are either curious or not curious. So if you are leading a team, or if you, even if you have a, you're on a team and you're struggling to connect with somebody else on your team, figuring out how they are curious may help you build a bridge. So me understanding how my supervisor is curious gives me insight in how to communicate with them. Seeing how my sister is curious helps me to have a better relationship with her, because I can meet her in her curiosity. As I think before this project, I expected people to show up in the same way I was curious. And I that's not offering much grace to people. And that's a really high expectation that I don't think we can ever meet.
In my head, I can hear some of my former clients, perhaps, naysaying a little.
That's why they're former
Yeah.
clients.
But it's okay. I mean, and sometimes you need people to naysay a little bit. But like, all right, if we look at the state, you were talking about that 50% disengagement rate right now in the US, just talking about the US. Something that I'm observing in my work, and at least the clients that I'm engaged with right now, is that people are even more so now in do. And I think coming out of kind of quarantine, pandemic, there's just like lots of things to be done. There's tasks, we're busy. And not all of it might be busy work, right? Some of it might be significant work, but they're busy, like they have a lot of things to get done. And I think I can hear people saying, it sounds to me like curiosity is going to take me some time. Like, when do I have time to be curious? So there's a myth that to be curious, because it's like asking questions and like, let's pause, let's slow it down and think through this, right? There is a myth, or maybe an association, that to be more curious at work in a really fast-paced work environment is to slow it down, and it's really like it can be a hindrance. It could get in the way. What do you think about
But
that
I'm
myth?
sorry, before you answer this very great question,
Yeah.
have you ever seen any company that advertises themselves as a slow-paced work environment?
Yes.
Or
No.
as a non everyone's a fast-paced work environment. We're
Yes. Speaking of
Absolutely.
employer brands, they think that makes them more attractive. No.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Alma, I think that's a great question. And like, I don't think that curiosity efforts in the workplace need to be a grand gesture. I think it can be as simple as, like, one thing that we did on the first team that we were a part of, Alma, was we had a 1-minute check-in at the beginning of each meeting, and we talked about our highs and our lows for the week. That is overt social curiosity. You know,
Thank you. Good example.
you are demonstrating a curiosity in how somebody's life is going in that moment. You have, just by doing that one simple thing, you have already increased curiosity in the room. Now, I think that there's also ways to encourage your employees. You know what? It is 5 o'clock. It is time for you to go home. I really encourage you to, you know, go, go to a movie. I mean, I think it doesn't have to all be in house in order for you to nurture your curiosity. But I do think that the organization itself can support curiosity in small ways that will have been big impacts. And some of that is having a speaker come in during the lunch hour. You know, it's a working lunch together, or um, simply ask your employees what they need, what would help them to be more curious. You know, I can sit here and spout off ideas that may work for me, but you have a huge resource, and that your employees know what they need. They know what makes them tick. And how often do we actually stop and ask them what they need?
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think we can all improve on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Frances Poe, what have you been curious about lately?
Oh, I'm curious about a lot of things. One thing that I am curious, I have just done an agile training on how to run agile teams, and that has
Oh,
been
cool.
a really big thing for me on that. And I'm headed to Japan in April, and so I am very curious about
whoa.
all things like
Wait, back it up. Why?
well, we can talk about all that. My mom was born in Tokyo, so the two of us are going to explore where she was born.
Really?
But so it's, you know, for me, travel is a huge part of sparking my curiosity. And so I know that I need regularly scheduled trips. And it doesn't all have to be to Japan. You know, I can drive 30 minutes down the road and walk in and out of shops and on a little main street, and that's going to spark my curiosity. So it goes back to, it doesn't have to be big things. But so what about y'all? What's sparking y'all's curiosity?
She turned it around on us. Did you see
No,
that?
good
Tuli?
question. Yeah.
Go first, Tuli. Go for it.
Sure. Sure. Well, I mean, I guess my kind of automatic response, even though like I'm engaged in my capstone project right now, which is about like the way managers treat their employees at work, and also the way that an organization's culture might affect the way people treat each other at work. So I'm really curious about that. I've been, because of what's going on in the world, I've been really curious about Russia and Eastern Europe in general, but yeah, like kind of, I've been very curious about that. And I've also, like, one thing I've also been curious about is just time, the way that we as human beings relate to time. I think is really, really, really fascinating. One of someone who I think one of our classmates, Sarah, recommended this really fantastic book to me. It's called 4,000 Hours, Time Management for Mortals. And
is this Sarah
name.
that reads at least 3 books a week? Is this Sarah Wiley?
it is Sarah Wiley. Yes, it is Sarah
3
Wiley.
books a week?
She's a powerhouse
Talk
reader.
to her. Okay.
And I actually have read this book 3 times, and I will read it many more times because it is incredible.
Wow.
And it's so like this question of like how we as human beings relate to time. Is time something we have at all? I mean, there are a lot of philosophical questions about this, so that's also something I've been very curious about. And and of course I'm really curious about your work and what you're doing and all that. Sorry, go ahead, Alma.
Okay, so before I answer, I want to say, I'm going to go meta 1 second, and then I'll bring it back down. So Francis, I think you just modeled a really good practice that anyone in a work environment could easily put into practice, because when you asked that question back to us, Tuli answered things that I talk to Tuli all the time, and I didn't know he was thinking about time, or well, Russia maybe a little bit. There was one other thing that I already forgot. that, that was
Only my
interesting.
capstone.
No, capstone I definitely knew.
Yeah.
But okay, the point is, even if I have poor retention, apparently,
No, I'm
the point
tough.
the point is, even asking that question like as a team leader and sitting around to listen to it, and he did it in about a minute, which is not a lot of time, is already a really cool way to foster curiosity and make it a value within a team. And then also you could do a little bit of team building. So boom, gem,
But
take
you're
that,
totally,
speakers, take
Alma,
it, take it,
you're totally
listeners.
right. You're totally
Yeah.
right. Like and like it's also like a cool thing to ask people, even to ask strangers, like instead of like the usual like, oh, we're from, which is also that there's curiosity there also. Like I'm generally curious about where sometimes where people are from or what they're into in life. But like asking that question, so well, what have you been curious about recently?
Lately. Yeah.
Lately.
Yeah.
That's
really
interesting.
cool.
That's an interesting question.
And you
Sorry.
may need
For
to
friend-
do like a
for building.
soft lead in with
Right.
the where are you from and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
Yeah.
you know, to
Yes.
build a little
Absolute
bit
strangers.
of rapport. But
Yes.
I mean, it is a great question.
Yeah.
It really is. Okay, I'm gonna answer.
Go
I know
ahead.
you're all
Go
waiting.
ahead, Alma.
Okay, so I promise this is not a shameless plug, but I'm also doing my capstone research, right? And I have my first interview tomorrow, and I'm studying narrative, like how people make sense of their team experiences through story, through narrative. So I'm really curious to see what in the world people are gonna tell me, right? And what I'm actually gonna learn from this. Like, there's so many things that I'm curious about how people are gonna take my questions, even though I've piloted. You know, you just don't know. So I'm curious, and I'm curious about what will happen because I'm opening it up to quite a few different cultures. And so I will also want to see if my little hypothesis that this narrative sense making is across all cultures, like what it might look like, if this is going to bring a bunch of challenges, if I'm going to be in a pool of tears at some point, like there's nothing. But anyway, so I'm curious about that. I've also been very curious about like Brazilian culture. I'm learning Portuguese, and I think language learning is fun, not only because it opens up an avenue to connect with different people, but because at least the way I do it is I'm also learning about a culture and a mindset and worldviews and everything. So like I just watch as much Brazilian Netflix as possible and talk to as many Brazilian friends as I can. And so I've been curious about that. I'm curious about jazz piano right now, and I've been looking in musical theory. I'm a piano player, but as an early teen, I rebelled against music theory because I thought it was so boring. And now I'm like, I need to learn this stuff and not just sheet music, not just reading sheet music, but actually understanding music theory. So those are a few things. I'll stop
Okay, well, so Tuli, find out if Alma sleeps tonight. And if she does, then we'll know that she handles her deprivation sensitivity well. Or if she is too eager to sleep because she's so excited about these conversations, then that may provide a little insight into the world of Alma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much insight.
I wanted to ask you, Francis, and I hope it's okay to ask you this on air, and if it isn't, we'll edit this out with our very, very sophisticated editing capabilities that Alma and I possess.
Yes.
But so you talked about travel and curiosity. I am very curious. One of the trips that I know you took with, I think it was with your mom, was you walked the Camino del Santiago. And I would love to know what you learned on that walk, on that trip, or
Great
one thing.
So first, I only walked a part of it. I did not walk the full thing. I did.
How much did you walk?
I walked about 80 miles.
Yeah, nothing. No.
Enough to get the certificate.
That's fantastic. 80 miles. Wow.
But we did this for my mom's 75th birthday. So that was pretty cool 70th birthday. The thing I think I learned the most is you have no idea what anybody's life journey is based on how they look. I mean, there were just some opportunities. The day that we started, and I'm even embarrassed to say this, but this was such a bias check for me. The day before we started the trip, we came in, we were tired, we hadn't slept from the plane and we're jet lagged and all that. And we sat down at this cafe, and this rowdy group of men, probably all in their it's really 30s and 40s, maybe, heavily tattooed, kind of bodybuilder type physiques, drinking beers, laughing, just like you, Tuli. And they were so loud and we were so tired. And I just assumed that they were locals. Well, the next day we get on the trip, we start on this journey, and all of these guys are hiking the Camino as well. And they sang and laughed the entire journey. And so when you're hitting mile 15 and you were just tired, your hips hurt, your feet hurt, you don't want to go anymore, and you hear these guys singing and telling stories. I couldn't understand a word that they were saying, but it propelled everybody. Anytime they would have walked by a group, everybody's pace would just pick up a little bit. And it made me realize that I had made assumptions and judgments without even realizing it. And I walked along people who had just gone into remission for breast cancer. I walked with grandfathers with their granddaughters celebrating the life of their son and father who had died. Like, you just don't know anybody's journey, and which is one reason why curiosity is so important, because unless you talk to people, you're never going to know. You're just stuck with those assumptions.
Oh, Frances, I appreciate you even more. That was
For my vulnerability and embarrassment in that. It was a really good learning for me.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Tuli, for asking that question. Because look at that, Jen.
That was fantastic.
What a dream team here. Thank y'all for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Please come back. Please come back.
Please do.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Is there anything else that we either haven't asked you, or anything else that you want to, anything you want to promote?
Oh my gosh. I just promote to give people a chance, be curious about them, offer grace, and how they show up is curious. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously a topic I could talk about for a lot longer. And so I just thank the dear listeners who have hung with us this long. And thank y'all for your curiosity and what I had to offer.
Well, thanks for coming, and come again.
Please do.
I love that.
Yeah.
Peace.
Bye. We'll be
Bye,
back.
everyone.
Happy whatever. I don't know when this will come out, but
probably after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. And we'll be back with another episode real soon. Thanks for listening.
Yes, we will.